Hey, Broderick here with another WoW TCG deck tech. Today we're going over Vorix Overkill Rogue. It's this guy right here, Vorix Zorbuzz. There's a couple different versions of this deck going around, but this is the one I like. He's got a really important flip. Pay 3, flip Vorix, and it's permanent for the rest of the game. When Vorix would deal melee damage, he deals that much nature damage +1 instead. So anytime he would deal melee damage, he deals nature and it's +1. So the kind of things that do melee damage would be cards like Deathblow, where you get to it just says deal 1, basically. It says deal 1. There's some other stuff to it. But it deals 1, and this will pump it up by another 1. So your spells begin to deal +1 damage. And anytime you're auto-attacking, or you're just turning sideways, you're attacking, technically you're doing melee damage, so that gets pumped up by 1 too. That damage will add up really fast, so you usually want to try and flip on turn 3 or turn 4 just as soon as you can, because it makes your cards more efficient to do more damage. What's the point of this deck? It's not really a combo deck, but it plays a bit like a control deck, but its purpose is to fill up its own graveyard with these combo cards here. Specifically, they have a combo, like a type called combo. So you want to fill up your graveyard with these cards, and then use your finishers, and these different cards will use these guys as a resource. So your it's just basically a graveyard deck that uses control cards to survive, and then uses a lot of burn spells to kill your opponent, in combination with your flip, making all the burn spells a little more efficient. So that's the best way I can describe it. It is called Overkill Rogue. The other version of the deck is way less interactive and just plays more burn spells, but we already kind of play a lot of burn spells. So let me show you some of the interaction we have. Overkill. As an additional cost to play, remove up to 5 finishing move cards in your graveyard from the game. Most of the time, finishing moves require you to remove combo cards up here. This one specifically requires other finishing moves. So itself counts, Raze counts, kidney shot counts. These cards really aren't great, but they need to be here, otherwise Overkill just doesn't work. So as an additional cost to play, remove up to 5 finishing move cards in your graveyard from the game. Each opponent destroys that many of his equipment and discards that many cards, and your hero deals that much melee damage to each opposing hero and ally. Wow. So you pay 5, do a bunch of damage to your opponent's board. If he has any equipment, you're going to end up killing those, and then he has to discard most of his hand. So wipe your opponent's board and hit their hero, and they discard a bunch of cards, and if they happen to have equipment, kill those too. Yeah, that's huge. We have 3 of them, because you just don't need the 4th one that often. You really only need to draw 1 and cast 1 that game. I'm pretty sure wiping your opponent's board and killing all their hands and some of their permanents, that'll do it. So that's the Overkill version. It's very threatening to decks that can generate a lot of card advantage, like mid-range and control decks, where the burn deck can kill them quickly, but kind of runs out of steam. So that's the main finishing move. Another finisher I want to look at is Raze. You won't really use this one that often, but here's how the finishing move mechanic works. To play, finishing move. To play, you need to remove X combo cards in your graveyard from the game. X can only be 5 or less, so you can remove 1 or 2, which is what you'll most often be using this kind of card on. Destroy each opposing ally and equipment with cost X. It's pretty expensive. Like, you might need to remove 2 or 3 of your combo cards just to kill some things. But again, you'll survive, and this deck's got a little bit of inevitability with it, at least better than some decks. So Raze is fine. Sometimes you use it to kill their equipment or their creatures. Sometimes you can only kill 1 creature with it, but it's really important. So do what you gotta do. Kidney Shot. Here's an interesting one. Pay 3, it's instant. It's got finishing move. And you get to pick of X of those combo cards, however many you exiled or removed. You get to exhaust all cards of the chosen kind. So usually I'll just do this for 1 on my opponent's untap step before he draws. I'll just cast Kidney Shot for 3, remove 1 combo card from my graveyard, and then tap all of my opponent's resources, so that he kind of skips a turn. It's really punishing to have this happen to you like multiple times in a row. But it does have a cost. I mean, you have to get rid of one of your combo cards in your graveyard, and those take a lot of work to get there. So Kidney Shot's not really something you want 4 of. But this card is useful. You can also use it on 2 or 3 at a time. If you do that, it's typically going to be their resources and their allies is the other mode you'll use it on, just to kind of fog and buy you a turn. But you do need to constantly consider if it's worth kidney shotting. Like, what does your opponent have in their deck that Did they have a huge turn 5 play? Like, are they going to Ulthok away one of your best cards? Or just think about the plays your opponent has and what key times you need to kidney shot their resources down in their untap step. The other finishers, I put Broderick in here as a finisher. I mean, he just, why not? He's in everything. And he kind of counts as a finisher because once he's in your graveyard, he contributes a lot to your overall damage. By sitting in your graveyard and letting you attack for one every turn, or multiple, depending on how many Brodericks, he also lets you take advantage of your hero power, so that you get to the point where you can just start hitting for 2 a turn. Like with 1 Broderick in the graveyard and a hero flipped, you punch for 2 a turn. With Boundless Agony in play, this doesn't amplify the damage or anything from his flip, but if you don't have any Brodericks and you do have a Boundless Agony, you can still get the +1. So this swings for really a minimum of 3 if you have your hero flipped. But the other part of it's so relevant. Damage that would be dealt is unpreventable in case your opponent's got armor and equipment that you just can't get rid of. That happens sometimes. Or if they've got some kind of weird bubble play. Or some people play like priest cards that prevent damage. Can't be healed is also really relevant. You don't care about healing in your deck, but a lot of decks play Undercity or Daydak or ways they can heal huge chunks of damage, and just throwing this down really puts the clock on your opponents. And we have a lot of direct burn, so it finishes our game plan. I mean, also pretty cheap to swing with, so you're going to end up attacking for just 3 alone if you have no Brodericks, or 4 or 5 with Brodericks. And that'll end the game without even casting other spells. These cards mostly just sit in the graveyard. I'll go over them last. Let's look at the enablers. This enables the deck to work by putting combo cards and finishing moves in the graveyard. And also Brodericks, because he's good. Seal Fate. As an additional cost to play this ability, put the top 5 cards of your deck into your graveyard. Then you deal melee damage to a target hero or ally equal to the number of rogue abilities put in your graveyard this way. What's nice about this card is that it doesn't really care if you put combo cards or ability cards or finishing moves in the graveyard. It just cares if it's rogue abilities. So it'll still work on all these cards like Poach, which doesn't count as combo or anything at all. So you can get lucky. Seal Fate for me usually ends up hitting between like 3 to 4 abilities. I'd say 3 is average. So you'll average 3 damage, 1 more damage if your hero's flipped. So just think of every ability here, plus 1 damage if your hero's flipped, so it adds up. This is great to use on turn 1, just nug your opponent in the face, see how many abilities you get in the graveyard, kind of formulate your game plan around it. It's also fine removal, but in this deck, we want to point as much of the burn damage at our opponent's face as possible, then use cards like Kidney Shot to tap our opponent's creatures, or Gouge, which stuns something, which where it's tapped and it doesn't untap for another turn. Gouge is basically a stun for 2 turns, so it's like a temporary stop. We have a couple Carnages that can destroy. It's another sweeper. We went over Overkill, does a bunch of damage to their allies. Like we have 1, 2, it's like 3, 4, 5. That's a temporary sweeper. So 7 main deck sweepers plus these 2 temporary sweepers. There's a lot of ways to stop your opponent's allies, so we need to aim burn damage at the opponent's face. And that's what this is for. Damage their face, fill up your graveyard, move on. This is probably the best card in the deck. Besides Overkill, but this just makes the deck work. The Ring of Blood, the Warmaul champion, just a quest. As soon as you put it into play, put the top 3 cards of your deck in your graveyard. Most of the time you want to do this as soon as you can, so that way you can plan your game around it. Eventually you'll pay 3 and draw a card off it. Not a great quest in that regard, but enabling, the more the enablers, the better. These are the kind of cards you want to look for in your opening hand. Seal Fate and this quest. And then we have 2 Ruthlessness. Take a moment and read this one. Put up to 5 combo cards from your remove from game zone into hand. This is a really neat card. So as you're using your other cards, your finishers that make you remove from game these certain combo pieces, Ruthlessness can basically draw 5 of those from the remove zone and puts them into your hand. Specifically this one, Deathblow. It's instant. You deal 1 damage, and you get to remove up to X cards. So we would, try to remove as many as you can, maybe 5. So 1 plus X, if X is 5, is 6, and then your hero power pumps it up to 7. So this thing fully loaded is a 1 mana 7 damage burn spell. And then later on, this itself is both a finisher and a combo ability, so it sits in your graveyard. And then your opponent, if he has no way to get rid of it, and you use one of your finishers, exile this, and use your Ruthlessness to get back Deathblow, then you can Deathblow using a bunch of cards and hit them for 7 again for 1 mana. Yeah, Ruthlessness is the kind of card on turn 6 you just use it to get Deathblow back and kill your opponent. You get your opponent pretty low, and Deathblow is probably like the main finisher, other than just random attacks. Deathblow is the card you'll win the game with the most often, from my experience. Here's the other combo cards. We've got two Thuds. There's 3 of them. It's a 2-cost instant ability. Again, it's just a stun. Exhaust target card in play. It can't ready during its controller's next ready step. So Gouge does the same thing for creatures or heroes. So this is great versus protectors, or if you're just trying to survive, knock down their creatures, or if it's a solo deck, it's fantastic. Thud can target any card. So you can use Thud to knock down annoying pieces of armor or a weapon that's killing you. Or honestly, I just use it on resources most of the time to keep your opponent from, again, hitting those critical 5 or 4 drops or whatever their deck is relying on. And it doesn't seem like a great card. It's really not. It mostly is just there to fall into your graveyard on accident. And then at some point, you'll end up getting it and having to cast it. Carnage. It's a board wipe. I mean, you don't really have any allies yourself, and this thing only kills opposing allies. Carnage is sweet. If you can survive to get to 5 mana, then you'll usually wipe most of the board off. Just be aware this thing doesn't kill cards with Will the Forsaken like Deathveer, so you're going to have another way to deal with him. Slay the Feeble. We have 4 of these. This is 1 cost. Deal 3 damage to a target exhausted hero or ally. And again, 3 pumped up by 1 makes it 4. So 1 mana, deal 4. It only works against exhausted targets, so that's when cards like Kidney Shot, Thud, and Gouge can tap your opponent's hero. That way this 1 mana spell can actually hit them. Other than that, it's just drag to fill up your graveyard. Here's our draw and interaction. Let's skip the draw for now and go straight to the discard. Poach, 1 mana. It's like Inquisition of Kozilek from Magic, except it hits 4 or less, so it hits like just most of the game. This card, I don't know about this one. It was a really good discard spell. It almost always hits something really relevant at every point in the game. It is neither a combo nor is it a finisher, so it has no synergy with the rest of the deck. Its only synergy is just interrupting your opponent's game plan. 2 Burgle. This is also a combo card, so we can move it up here, just so you can get a better idea. But it's also an interactive card. It costs 7. It's instant. Target any number of opposing abilities, allies, and equipment. You control them until the end of your turn. Alright, so why is this card in the deck? If you ever get to the point in a game where you know it's just not going to end early, they just have too much stuff, you can pull back, play control, get to 7 mana, and then on your opponent's turn, on his untap step, after he untaps all of his creatures and equipment, cast Burgle for 7, take everything on his turn, because you gain them until the end of your turn. So at the start of your opponent's turn, Burgle all of his permanents except his hero and his resources. Then on your turn, all those creatures will be in play at the start of your turn already, same with the equipment. So you can just kill your opponent. I mean, I straight up Burgled my opponent's board and then hit him for 30 damage worth of his own creatures. So it's the kind of card that creates stories, but in most games it's not going to see a use. It's just going to be a resource or sit in your graveyard. But you know that it's got potential. And then look at that little rogue, the little gnome's face. Just it's very punchable. Am I right? Next up is Scourge of Adrenaline. We have 4 copies of this. Pay 5, instant, draw 3 cards. You can also remove combo cards, and every card you remove reduces the cost by 1. I usually end up paying, I think, about 3 for this. 3 or 4 mana, maybe 2 sometimes. You kind of want to leave those cards mainly for Deathblow. This is the card that will win the game most of the time, so Scourge of Adrenaline, you'll end up removing most of the stuff, but as long as you can keep your game plan going and draw more cards, just keep in mind, it itself is not a combo card, so I like to have 2 piles of abilities. Like when I play this deck, I pull all the combo cards into a separate stack, so it's so easy to play that way. Here's some more interaction. Junkboxes Needed. This is a quest that's pretty similar to Poach. On your turn, choose ability, ally, equipment, pay 2, flip the quest over, and then you look at your opponent's hand and discard a card of that kind. I mean, if it's versus aggro or mid-range, you can hit allies. If it's versus control, you hit ability. If it's versus a specific equipment deck, go for equipment. And a little bit of knowledge goes a long way with this deck, especially if you poached earlier, you already know what their hand's full of. So this is a nice uninterruptible quest, and we need some resources, but we honestly don't want to pay the resources to draw cards. We just kind of want to interrupt our opponent's game plan and then get there with uninteractive graveyard shenanigans. We got 3 Eye of the Storms. These will add up eventually, and we'll use these to tap down our opponent's board on a key turn. 4 for Great Honors. A lot of our best cards are odd, and that's what this card can grab. It can grab cards that cost 1, 3, or 5, or 7 with Burgle. And it's a really cheap way to draw cards. It's just nice, cheap card draw selection that will almost always find a target. I mean, look at all these good cards. Deathblow is one of our better cards. Carnage is one of our sweepers. Burgle is one of our in-game cards in case you needed that. Overkill is one of our best cards. You can kidney shot for a key turn if you grab it. You can grab one of your mini finishers. And then it always has a use. It also grabs both your card draw spells that cost 5. Like it's a really efficient 1 mana card draw spell. Okay, that's the main deck. Let's move over to the sideboard. I got 4 Vuz'dins. You don't really have any ability removal as a rogue, so we have some discard, and we can toss this guy into play, and if they choose to sit there and deal with him, then we'll just continue to burn their face. But hey, ongoing ability decks, they'll never go away, so gotta have some of him. 1 Shuriken of Negation. I don't know about this card, but it seems fun. If you can get to the point where you're kind of hanging back and just swinging with Broderick triggers every turn, you can just keep this thing up, and if they don't cast an ability, you Deathblow. If they do cast an ability, you Shuriken away. Once this, like your opponents will hate this card if it's in the right matchup and they're an ability deck or control deck, and you draw the freaking Shuriken, they're going to be real upset. Poison the Well, I have 3 copies in here. This card is not, it's not a combo, it's not a finisher, so it has no synergy, but 2 mana, wipe the board instantly. You don't really have creatures that need to worry about this, so this is excellent in those low-cost matchups like Hunter and Warlock, that any aggro deck, really, that's got a bunch of creatures, and you just side this in. That's what the sideboard's for. 2 Scourge of Lordaeron if you're against another graveyard deck. And if you throw these in your graveyard, there's really nothing you can do with them. I mean, they're just useless, so you're just trying to get lucky and draw it. So you're welcome to replace these with whatever cards you like, but that's what I put in here for now. That's Vorix Overkill Rogue. You get in there and disrupt your opponent a little bit, burn them out, tap them down, disrupt their game plan with tapping and discarding and destroying their permanents, and then you'll usually either win just by death blowing. Oh, I'm not gonna say that phrase. You'll kill them with death blow a few times, or by a lot of auto attacks with Broderick plus the sword, or is it a dagger? Plus the dagger plus your flip. It's a fun little deck. And it requires some brains to pilot. You really have to pay attention to your graveyard. So it's not the easiest deck to play, but it's real fun. As soon as you draw your first overkill and you get someone with it, you're like, that's why people play this deck. Or when you Ruthlessness back 2 death blows and a bunch of stuff, and you death blow and kill your opponent for like, I don't know, 7 damage, 8 damage from the 2 of them together. It's just a fun little combination. I'd recommend you try it out. I hope to see you in game.